Hello, and welcome to the Partnership Project's NVR Podcast. This is Season 3, Number 3, Overcoming Resistance Fatigue. I'm Jill Lubienski.
And I'm Peter Jakob.
And Peter, it's lovely to be with you again, to have this opportunity to talk about resistance fatigue. It was a topic that we kind of just spoke about a little bit briefly before we came on air. And I really like the idea of this, how we overcome the fatigue that can set in when we're dealing with really difficult situations and we're trying to, it uses a lot of energy, I guess, doesn't it? But I'm going to ask you to start us off. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts as a starting point on this.
Okay, well, it's been on my mind for quite a while. Because sometimes one experiences parents as really energized when we plan action. And sometimes parents just come across as so exhausted. And as a matter of fact, I was running some training recently, and I spoke about a mother who was just seemed so tired. And someone asked what I felt, what kind of problem that was. And I said, I just think she's tired. It really sort of consolidated in my mind the other day in supervision. And I was working with two colleagues, trained NVR practitioners who work in a CAM service in Scotland, a man and a woman, and they've been sort of establishing NVR within their service, and they have found themselves wading through the treacle of bureaucratic hurdles, of a failure to support what they do adequately, and a failure to resource what they do adequately, whilst there being an expectation that they should do it and contribute to the reduction of waiting list times and so on. And we had a conversation about it, and they spoke about how deflated they felt coming into the supervision. And after the supervision, they've both said how re-energized they felt, how much more optimistic. So I just thought, oh gosh, this is exactly the sort of thing that parents experience, peaks and troughs, or maybe I should say troughs and peaks, because we want to talk about how one comes out of the trough. And climbing a peak sometimes can be very difficult, and at other times it can be very fast.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I was just really interested in this whole idea, really, and that idea of the peaks and troughs and the energy levels, waxing and waning depending on what might be the weather, I suppose. If you're climbing a peak and it's a sunny, I'm looking out of the window now, the sun is shining, there's no wind, it's a clement day in Wales.
I was going to say in Wales, indeed, yes, where there's such beautiful peaks.
There's such beautiful peaks. It's a different experience climbing in the storm, isn't it? When and climbing on your own. I was thinking, perhaps we have people that, I don't climb, but I'm trying to imagine that you're tied to somebody else, aren't you, to give you a bit if you're going very high.
Yeah, there are a few, well, it's an apt metaphor because there are a few climbers who climb solo and they're not on a rope and the risk is very high. you know.
Mm.
So, and that's why, of course, in NVR, we really stress the importance of not going it alone.
Yeah.
And that may very well be an important factor already. Uh, I just think of when I'm climbing, and of course, at my age, I'm quite a mediocre climber. And one of my sons belaying me, and I'm saying, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I really feel tired already, you know. And my son who's belaying me says, come on, Dad, you can do it. You can do it. And somehow that amounts to what in NVR we call moral support.
Yeah.
That's an important element, isn't it? But
Totally.
you also spoke to the drudgery, I guess, when you said, you know, it's different in sunny weather, but perhaps when it rains and when it's windy, it's a different matter. What is the drudgery? What are the exhausting parts that parents experience? And indeed, is it the resistance, or is it just the problem? I'm never quite sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure. The drudgery of putting one foot in front of the other when, you imagine you can't see the end.
Yeah,
If I'm walking up a mountain, I don't know where the peak is. It just is enveloped.
yeah,
I'm enveloped in a thick fog, and I don't know the route. Because sometimes you have to put faith in somebody else's map reading skills, don't you?
yeah,
You don't know where you're going, and I think that's
yeah,
often the process with our parents is they don't know the map that we have to guide us as NVR
yeah,
practitioners. And then there is that kind of relational element of we don't deny the struggle. It's hard.
yeah,
It takes
yeah,
energy, but we're with you. And maybe we are slightly in front, we're leading the way, that positioning.
yeah,
Sometimes we're a bit more in front. And then maybe sometimes we move.
yeah. We've got a map. We nonetheless do not know the terrain,
Exactly.
and the map and the terrain don't always match. And we might get lost with the parents in the terrain, even though we've got a good map. And I'm sort of thinking about what you said about the parents sort of not so much knowing where they're going. And I'm thinking that uncertainty, which in a way is really a good thing, which we would like to cultivate because these parents have so often been told, do exactly this, do exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah.
We perhaps allow more uncertainty in parents, in ourselves, in spite of having a map, in spite of knowing some things that make a big difference. But I think that uncertainty that can contribute to exhaustion, along with just the sheer exhaustion of having dealt with these problems in one way or the other for such a long time. So I already come into the sessions, into the NVR work with exhaustion, maybe. I've tried so much over so many years. I have the feeling I've tried everything. And now here is someone who's sitting across from me who's very optimistic, who invites me to try yet something new. And it may take a while until I experience that as invigorating.
Totally. I think it can be very difficult for parents to, probably not feel unheard, to get angry with somebody who's, really gung ho and come on, you can do it, when they don't, they're really not feeling that. Your energy mismatch can be very unhelpful sometimes if you.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm thinking about, that whole metaphor of having the map and the terrain. And like you say, you can get lost on the terrain. But if I, as the practitioner, have certain quite well practiced survival skills, even when I don't know necessarily quite where I am, my survival skills are pretty good.
yeah,
And I might look at the person here in front of me and think, well, I could go on, I could actually keep going here, but actually what's going to happen to them? So maybe at this point, it's better, even though my energy levels are high and I know I could orientate myself, find a way out of this. The better thing to do would be to stop or slow down and give them some water, give them some basic tender care.
Yeah.
And that's what we can sometimes be doing in sessions, I think, is putting down our clever methods. And, we might have spent some time thinking about, before we go in, I wonder what kind of resistance the parents could put up today. I've got some good ideas here. Maybe they could do this or that. Maybe I'll suggest that we think about. And actually, the timing's wrong. Your energy is wrong. Actually, what the parents need is containment, holding a bit of time.
So you seem to be speaking to the resources that parents need and how they need to resource themselves and be resourced by others in order to accomplish things. And the other thing I was thinking of is I might have wonderful ideas. Yeah, I might think, a sit-in would be of the order here, or this, that, or the other, or a particular way in which parents might protect themselves from abusive communication or how they could de-escalate further. But I've always experienced some of the best moments, some of the most sparkling moments in the NVR process when parents come up with some new idea or say, this is what I'd like to do something about. And do you have some suggestions or whatever? So there's something that when that energy rises in the parent at a certain point, I think that's the most valuable because that's the most valuable moment, because then the parent or the parents go out there having co-created an idea or a plan of action with us, but they are the co-creators. They're the primary creators, as it were.
Yeah. And I think there's something in that, isn't there, as a practitioner, about the resistance to be. Because in those moments, I think, Peter, when parents are perhaps very deflated, and as a practitioner, we're thinking, maybe I need to do even more. I'm not doing enough. And the drive can be to move us sometimes into positions of expert, give, like you just said, giving the ideas and just do more of this and becoming that. You've often spoken about this critical prescriptive other, there's a danger that we move into that. And actually the relational aspect of what we do comes right down here, right low down the scale. And the parents' experiences actually as unsupportive, unhelpful,
Well, I'm also thinking, if at such moments we feel, I haven't done enough, I've got to do more. It's interesting, in the German language, there's a distinction between two words that are quite close. One is activism, and the other one in German, it's actionism. Okay. And Germans say sort of actionism, that has negative connotations. That's like just doing for doing's sake. And I guess if we sort of get into that, and if we become prescriptive because we feel we're not doing enough, then parents are likely to feel they're not doing enough. We're likely to communicate that to them. That somehow it's not good enough what you're doing. And here I am, I'm already stretched. I'm already doing everything in my power. And now I'm sitting opposite this NVR practitioner who's somehow, not explicitly, but implicitly telling me, hey, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. And what do I then feel? Maybe I feel a failure. Maybe I feel ashamed because I feel I've failed so many times. I'm sort of thinking about in the supervision what we did. And the colleagues started out talking about their vision for the future, but they appeared tired. And as it turned out, they were, as it turned out. So I asked permission to not talk about their vision for the future of their NVR service yet. And we spent half an hour out of a 1-hour supervision session talking about what they've already achieved, just looking back quietly. And it was tremendous what they've achieved. And it was tremendous what they've built up, the kind of appreciation they have found from others for what they do, their competence, not only in delivering NVR, but also in building a service. And their wonderful bloody-mindedness of continuing to wade through the treacle and to resist against all odds. And I felt increasing energy in myself over that half hour. And as it turned out, so did they. So maybe that was part of the nourishment. There are probably other resources as well, but maybe that was what resourced us in both the colleagues and myself. And I think it can be very similar in the therapeutic conversations we have with parents, that when we look back with them at what they have achieved, sometimes throughout the entire process, that's part of the resourcing they need.
Yes, lovely. I like that very much. Just thinking about, the benefits of supervision and having that containing other person, like you were, to have the ability to give permission to step off that path of I must do more to, and it's not going anywhere, and look at my energy and it feels so slow, and you're able to say, well, let's not do that. And let's just think about how far you've come, what the journey has looked like so far, and what that's given to those practitioners as a sense of appreciation for, you've appreciated them, and then they can begin to appreciate their own achievements in a way that perhaps wasn't visible in such a clear sighted way before. And it matters, I think, to have somebody in that position that they see as supportive and they value giving that feedback. You as the supporter for those colleagues in Scotland. So important. And it makes me think of that whole thing about walking through treacle. They'll still be walking through treacle, but it might taste sweeter, It's like...
You can dip your finger in and have a lick.
And that's okay. I quite like treacle.
What do you think, Jill? What other resources are important when people step off the bandwagon for a while, step off or the escalator or whatever it is that they're on? What other resources do you feel?
I think it makes me think that sometimes it might be about remembering what I have that is more than the current moment and the difficulty of the situation that I'm in, and having permission maybe just to recall that. I was talking to a parent earlier this week whose situation on the surface just seems like, really dire. And she's in fact a great grandmother, I think. She's parenting children, and I was talking, it's early days in my work with them. I don't really know them very well, so I'm just trying to sort of think all of those things we've talked about. How do I not be that, expert knowing what we should be doing now, and lots of professionals being involved, and here's the NVR practitioner and pressure from outside systems, let's see what this NVR practitioner can do that we couldn't, and let's hope it's not much. Because, it's a very complicated kind of situation. And I remember, just thinking, I'm not really sure. And I was talking something, I said about, one of the things we do in NVR, we look at, the patterns in things, how people are getting on. And sometimes these things follow certain scripts and patterns. And it just came to my mind. I looked at this woman, I said, "Oh, do you knit?" To me, and she said, "Oh, yes." And I said, "Oh, I don't." I said, "But I've always imagined, my mum used to knit, and there's patterns involved, isn't there? Patterns, and you follow patterns." And I said, "What do you knit?" And she said, "Well, I knit a lot. I knit babies' booties, matinee, little booties or little matinee jackets, and lots of them." And I said, "Oh, and are they the same patterns for the two things?" And she said, "No, they're different patterns." And I said, "Okay, so a few different stitches and you can make different things with these patterns. Either it will come out as a bootie or it will come out as a matinee coat or a hat, but you just put a few different stitches." And she said, yes. And I said, "Well, I guess that's what we're doing in NVR. We're knitting, but we're following a different pattern. Because if we keep knitting in the one pattern, we keep getting the same outcome. I might have a big pile of booties when actually what I'm looking for is a bit more variety." And then she said, "And you know what? I used to have a knitting machine. I haven't used that for ages." And she just began to think of just something she enjoyed doing. It was nothing to do with, And I just thought, I didn't say anything about that, but I just thought there was something in that moment where she reconnected with, I used to like doing that. And that felt important,
And I'm just thinking of that, the joy of knitting with a new pattern. And perhaps part of the resource, or the way parents become resourced or can become resourced in the NVR process, is an appreciation that what they are experimenting with in NVR is really new and different.
Yeah.
And even if it's uncertain, and even if there's risk, and there is risk when you resist, there is the excitement of doing something new.
There is.
And exploring. And, I'm increasingly working with adults using NVR, in just adult individual therapy. And someone I'm going to see sent me an email listing the difficulties. And I was reading the letter, and I realized how many good things that person has in their life already that weren't highlighted in the letter, but and at the same time, how that person seems to have dealt with the other person with whom they have great difficulties in the same way, the same old dance. And now and they're dealing with an elderly parent whom they've experienced as very difficult throughout their lifetime and exploitative and so forth. And I sort of got really excited thinking, oh, I can feed back how rich I experience their life reading the email in one step. And in a second step, looking at, well, what would a different dance look like?
Yeah.
And maybe that could be exciting for them.
Absolutely. And there is the energy. You spoke about energy at the beginning, didn't you? And the ups and downs. And even in a session and in moments, how once you connect with those, maybe it's possible to think of a different dance. And if it sits well with a person, the energy lift is quite immediate, actually. You can see it in people.
Yeah, you can see people coming out of depression, actually, sometimes in the moment.
Absolutely.
Right then and there.
Yeah. And as a practitioner, what's interests me is what that does to me and how I also lift. There's just a little hook, something to grow and a little bit of hope, isn't it? And We talk about holding hope a lot in NVR. And those moments as practitioners are feeding for the soul, aren't they?
What happens when you experience that lift? What happens?
I think it just gives me the energy, to think, oh, there's more here. There's a resistance then to falling into that kind of blame that's possible, isn't it? We begin to be, our judgments begin to come out, and we begin to give ourselves some self-talk about this family, NVR's not for them, or, all of those things that might come, gives us a little bit more hope to resist and to think, no. Here's something.
Two things, really. Energy. But with that energy comes a different kind of thought process.
Yeah.
That goes beyond blame.
Yeah.
Because blame, of course, is associated with a victim narrative.
Yeah.
Somebody is harming somebody else who can't help but being harmed. That is commensurate with blame. And if we move out of blame, either the family can't do NVR, or someone who's upsetting someone in the family or harming someone in the family is simply being terrible. If that is the focus of our narrative, of course, then the parents and we are stuck.
Exactly.
But if we go, so what's beyond the blame then? When the blame sort of diminishes?
I think it's humanizing. When you see somebody and the struggles, you see them, you see more of them, more possibilities in them and their potential for being the, having the solutions to their problems, if you like, or whatever it is that's going on, but also having already all the resources within them, within their network, that's all there. It's all there. And actually the bit that we fail, I think, as practitioners sometimes, is to be creative enough, maybe imaginative enough, maybe resistant enough. But we have to get help. We have to get our own help. That's why the supervision that you talk about is so key.
Yeah.
We have to reconnect with that in ourselves in order to give it when we're in a session.
So we resource ourselves as well. And I'm just thinking, though, maybe that is the point where you experience that surge in energy, your client experiences that surge in energy. Maybe that's the point where we bring in those methods for parents again. What about using the campaign of concern in this regard? What about that? But then the how of that will be developed in a much better way by the parents themselves, because they will sense and know how.
Yeah.
Do you think this is a good point for us to sort of come to an end of today's podcast?
Yeah. Great. Oh, that was a stimulating conversation for me.
I found it stimulating as well.
I hope our listeners find things in what we've talked about that resonate and which give them some nourishment for their souls to carry on doing this work that can sometimes feel like your colleagues in Scotland said, can sometimes feel like wading through treacle, but let's find ways to make it sweeter as a journey.
I love that idea of wading through treacle but dipping one's finger in it and tasting the sweetness.
Yeah. Lovely. Thank you, Peter. And I'll see you again next time for more conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill. Bye.